Hi, my name is Dontrell Jackson Ross, and this presentation is Intercultural Responsiveness and Emotional Intelligence. Goldman's Four Facets of EI. Goldman's four facets of emotional intelligence provide a comprehensive framework for understanding and developing emotional intelligence skills, both in personal and professional contexts. By cultivating these facets, individuals can enhance their ability to navigate emotions, build meaningful relationships, and contribute to a more empathetic and inclusive society. And these four facets include self awareness, self management, social awareness, and relationship management. In the context of my presentation, I will talk about emotional intelligence in regards to the organization where I am connected to, and that is Columbus State University. Columbus State University is a member of the University System of Georgia, and it is located in Columbus, which is about 100 miles south of Atlanta. The student population is approximately 8,300 students, and 68% of our students are first generation college students who come from diverse racial backgrounds. A key component of Goldman's ideology involves people as assets, and internally and externally, our stakeholders and people are assets to the institution. These assets include students, faculty and support services, as well as administrative staff, executive staff such as deans, provosts, university presidents, and also those who are partners within the institution, such as alumnus, volunteers, and community partnerships. If we look closely, the racial and ethnic background and breakdown of our undergraduates is quite diverse. CSU is located in southern Georgia, and about half of the population, 46%, come from white backgrounds and ethnic groups. 39 to 40% are Black and African American. 7% are Hispanic. And then we also have other racial groups that make up Asian, international, and multi-ethnic groups. As you can see from this pie chart, CSU is a diverse university. So it requires for those who are involved in making the university better to have a diverse mindset. So when I think about the four facets of this construct, one of my strengths would be self-awareness. I know how to recognize how my feelings are effective and introspective, and my thoughts are about the values and feelings that affect my job and performance. I also recognize when self-assessment and feedback are needed to help cultivate new leadership skills and strengths. And I also can recognize that my contribution brings about a presence that is unique and it stands out from other leaders. So that is one thing that I can say that I recognize as my contribution is being emotionally aware of my own motives and character and focus and intelligence and what I bring to the team. Another strength is that I have good self-management skills. So a part of that is having good adaptability, having the ability to handle multiple demands without losing focus and able to adjust to unforeseen changes in organizational life. Um, if anyone knows anything about higher ed, when you are a part of a faculty group, you not only are responsible for teaching, but you're responsible for committee work, you're responsible for service and research and all of these other aspects to academic life. And so having good adaptability is essential to success. Also, another good self-management skill set that I possess is being initiative driven. And initiative driven involves being solution driven and, when possible, cut through some of the organizational red tape to bring forth change. There's been several instances where I've had to go beyond my comfort zone and to have a growth mindset, as a matter of fact, to push past rigid and stagnant policies and procedures that did not help bring forth change. And then lastly, another aspect of self-management that I possess is transparency. I have the ability to admit my mistakes and faults, and even when I am novice at something, looking for some type of mentorship in times of uncertainty. Recognizing this contributes to a presence that brings about a uniqueness, and it stands apart from some of the other leaders. I do have strengths, but I also know I have areas of improvement. And one example of that would be being able to create and interpret data. I am a hands-on type of person, and you can put me in a classroom to interact with students and to teach them a concept, and I'm great at that. But when it's time to use different assessment tools, such as Watermark's open access tools and some of the other assessment data software that we use, that is where I struggle because that's not my skill set. So I do utilize individuals who are a part of the institutional advancement team and who may be directors and coordinators for the quality enhancement plan, individuals who are used to looking at data to help connect me with data and how to use the data in my classrooms as well. Now, a weakness that I have, it's not really a surface level weakness. It's really looking introspectively at my core and being honest with myself from recent and past experiences that I've experienced as an educational leader and also just as a person, period. And that would possess having social awareness and relationship management. Learning more about others who have different value systems and a moral compass is something that I've had to work on, specifically as it relates to, um, just different things that some of the students present to me that I didn't grow up with or that I didn't have a full understanding about, which coordinates to the next point, remaining generationally relevant and aware of different age groups, and core values. I am 37 years old, and most of my students that I teach now are part of the Gen Z um, generational group, and their experiences that they've had are quite different from my experiences, just like the experiences of those who have come before me, who are part of the baby boomer generation, the silent generation, and even Gen X. I'm considered a millennial. And so the groups that have come before me, we all share these different life experiences. And so I have to make sure when I'm using examples that my examples are relevant to my audience. And that has sometimes, as I've grown a little older, I've seen some of the disconnect with some of my antiquated examples because my students were not there to experience that. So I have to remain generationally aware. Then also being emotionally aware and of implicit biases that are outside of the realm of my own social construct. And so I consider myself to be a pretty diverse and open minded individual, but there are things that I'm not aware about. Case in point, I had a few semesters ago a student who identifies with the LGBTQIA plus community. And this individual identified as a trans uh, person. And I was unaware of the pronouns that are used for this particular gender classification. Also, I was unaware that there was a difference between sexual orientation and gender identification. And so I had to really do some research and be vulnerable to some of my students so that they could explain to me some of these things. So that's where I have had a weakness, and unfortunately, I think that I'm not alone in this. That since we do live in a pluralistic society and a society that is all for change, and we're living in a different worldview from times past, it does take time to adjust to, say, for example, using the correct pronouns, knowing what is racially acceptable, culturally acceptable, or susceptible with gender. But I do also think that we should also offer grace to individuals as well, right? I don't think that if someone is not aware of what a certain pronoun is, that they are not inclusive enough, or they are not concerned with equity. It's just something that we all have to be taught. I can say this: most recently, I had a non-binary student in one of my classes who did not participate in their graduation. And I had asked the question, well, why didn't you go to your graduation? And they said that their school, their high school, would not allow for them to be called by the name that they identify with, that they wanted to call them by their government name, and they no longer identify with that. So they had to watch their graduation via online. And I thought that was disheartening. So um, along with some of these other things, just being emotionally aware and socially aware of, um, you know, life outside of the realm of my own social and mental constructs. And then also, and I think this is most important, one of the weaknesses that I'm working on is being aware of my followers, specifically my students' silent frustrations and nonverbal cues. Oftentimes, I would have a student. Even tonight, I did a Zoom meeting with one of my classes, and a student said that she was upset with me for half of the semester because she thought that I was picking on her regarding, some of her class content. And in all actuality, that wasn't the case at all. I just, like I was supposed to do, I was providing feedback. But when I went back and looked at the tone of my feedback, I said that this could have been for a student that is not used to being in a asynchronous environment that's rigorous. It could come off as it being personal. So I I have to be more aware of how I am perceived when communicating with students, and also look at their nonverbal cues and their silent language, right, to see exactly how they feel about what's being said. These are all things that make up emotional intelligence for a leader. As I have read in the literature from this week, being more aware of the people who you work with, making sure that you're not only listening to what they say, but how they say it, how they feel, the vibe that you get from them as they're speaking to you, the energy in the room. That all matters to turn those weaknesses into opportunities and turn those uh, the strengths into more strengths. Now, this is a good one. One other weakness that I say that I sort of possess is navigating the entire cycle of conflict resolution, specifically as it relates to mitigating the conflict so that it is completely finished. So I do possess adequate knowledge of helping to mitigate conflict resolution at the start of the initial confrontation. However, I lack seeing conflict as a positive problem in organizational structures. There are several pieces of educational leadership literature that says that sometimes conflict is a good thing, right? Because it indicates that there is an issue and a problem. And without identifying that conflict, the organization can't start the process of change. However, when there's conflict between individuals, specifically those assets that we talked about, right? People as assets, um, you can't just solve it in the beginning and just leave them by themselves to remedy it. You have to walk them through this cycle. So having a limited knowledge and guiding the cycle of the process from the conflict to the final resolution, that's where I need to improve. And that involves lacking the ability to help individuals identify the root cause and provide solutions to resolve issues permanently. So, I may be able to say, hey, how did this start? But then to follow up a few days later to make sure that things are really okay, that's where I forget, because I think that, or I thought that I already solved it, when indeed there's still silent frustrations and still unresolved matters within that particular conflict. So I'm looking forward to being able to improve in that regard. Goldman's four facets of emotional intelligence and inclusion reduces students' feelings of being marginalized, um, having racial biases and gender biases, cultural biases at my institution, Also, I can use this by having patience for students who may possess learning disabilities and differences. I did not specialize in, you know, uh, interacting with students who may come to the classroom with various learning differences. And so, really uh, taking additional courses and professional development opportunities to learn about accessibility services, to learn how to identify students who may need additional help without, um, you know, without foregoing their privacy, and also maintaining my FERPA uh, compliance is something that I've had to learn how to do. And I believe that that's all a part of being more aware of equity, because education should be accessible. I had a student who uh, had trouble hearing the lectures because of a hearing impairment. And I used the resources that I knew to connect that student with support services who was able to offer the student hardware resources and hardware materials where she could actually record the lectures via sound pack. And I think those are the type of things, not just thinking about the diversity, inclusion, and equity at a mental level, right? Or in a figurative emotional sense, but also actually as it is practiced, right? The practical application of doing this in a real time environment. And then also, I believe that these four facets, they bridge the gap between various cultural, racial, and generational groups in the classroom. Um, CSU, Columbus State University, is a public university, a public institution, and is open to every creed, every worldview, anyone who is looking to diversify themselves and receive a higher level of education. And so, with that, on a daily basis, you walk into a classroom with different cultural, racial, and generational perspectives, and it's up to you to blend those perspectives in a way that's respectable, that's fair, and that's also a way that's appreciative of where everyone is coming from to create a homogeneous classroom. So, as it relates to Bowman and Dill's human resource frame, in the human resource frame, Bowman and Dill 2017 highlights that employees are viewed as valuable assets to the organization. Their skills, talents, and knowledge are recognized as essential resources that contribute to the success of the organization. Now, this can be demonstrated in my own organization through empowerment and participation. The frame emphasizes empowering employees and involving them in decision making processes. Leaders seek to create a participatory and inclusive working environment where employees' input is valued and considered in the shape of the organization's direction. And I can say that CSU has done that. Most recently, we had a lot of changes in our leadership, and we had an interim president to come in for a year and a half to shake things up. And this interim president gave all of us, the stakeholders, an opportunity to be a part of the change management process. We had to relook at our curriculum. We had to relook at our degree programs, change our budgets, look at how we can contribute to the success of our retention and persistence data. And we all had to get involved and roll up our sleeves in order to keep the institution afloat. So this is a best practice for human resource frame management. In this here, intercultural responsiveness is important in an organization. According to Mixon and Jones 2017, they highlight the three principles of IR, suggesting that becoming culturally aware and interculturally sensitive can lead to intercultural responsiveness. Cultural awareness can be understood as how we think about culture, our thoughts about the cognitive perspective on culture. And intercultural sensitivity would be how we feel about and within different cultural contexts of the emotions that arise. And this is something that I think um, my organization is challenged with because of the varying perspectives. Um, Although it is a diverse organization, uh, you still have an organization where the majority of the individuals that attend are of um, Caucasian descent. They come from a white background, especially the higher you go into administration and into faculty positions. So, although our student population is quite diverse, our faculty population is still a bit limited. So, when having conversations about IR and cultural sensitivity and cultural awareness, sometimes conflicts arise that are not intentional, but because of these various perspectives from just a one-sided lens due to a limited exposure to, different racial groups and perspectives, sometimes there are, conflicts that happen within department meetings and even institutional functions. So one meeting in particular is a meeting that I was a part of. I'm a part of the English faculty at CSU, and most recently we were doing um, a meeting, so to speak, to talk about our curriculum. As I said, that interim president that came in told us that, hey, we needed to revise some of our curriculum. We needed to make sure that each class that we offered was indeed required for graduation. And so there was a course that was on the chopping block, and this course was the African American Literature course. Well, it just so happens that I happen to be the only African American male in my department. And so this was important to me because I felt that this course served as a great outlet for students. It provided representation for diversity, but it was a course that did not generate a lot of student traffic. And thus, it was considered to be a course that was at risk of, being counted out. And so one of the first things that was mentioned was said, well, the term African American literature may sound um, it may sound like it's antiquated, that it's outdated. And, we were trying to figure out, hey, should we call it African American literature or call it Black studies, considering everything that has happened with the Black Lives Matter movement and some of the other cultural social events. But then I had to bring up to them that, these things are introspective and subjective because to call someone African American, depending on who they are, they may not identify as African American. And some people who may say that that person is a Black person, that person may not identify as a Black person because they consider that to be a part of colorism, to say that, hey, my skin is not Black, my skin is brown, I'm a person of color. And then we said, well, to be racially and um, culturally and politically correct, call it African diaspora. But if you're calling it African diaspora, now you're talking about the diaspora of movements of Africans worldwide. And so there was all of this conflict with just naming this type of course. And the interesting part about it was that the conversation was happening between five white faculty members and one person of color, which was myself. And during the conversation, as I listened to my colleagues talk about this, I felt that there was a lack of cultural competence and a lack of continuous learning and some implicit biases. And I knew that they weren't intentional about it, but I said, hey, coming from someone who's actually living the experience, we have to be careful with this conversation because it's not a one size fit all, and everyone has different experiences. Your experiences with being around Black people is not the same as being a Black person or being an African American person or an Indigenous individual. So this is where we had to, come up together and to really think about intercultural responsiveness. And to be quite honest, it was refreshing because my colleagues they were open to some of the things that I had to say, and we decided to do a poll. We decided to bring the students in, especially from some of our students who are part of some of these racial groups and ethnic groups and cultural groups, to see what do they believe that the name of the course that represents this body of work, what it should be about, and what the name should be. So EI and IR leadership practices at CSU. These practices are essential for leaders because The people within an organization, specifically the internal stakeholders, come from diverse backgrounds, nationalities, ethnicities, ideologies, and worldviews. Intercultural responsiveness and emotional intelligence are essential for CSU leaders because they enable effective communication. They also promote a diverse and inclusive mindset of campus culture and core values. Our core value, or sort of our mantra, is create you. And in order to create you, you have to be able to be culturally sensitive because we have various cultures on campus. And overall, these two practices, EI and IR, they facilitate constructive conflict resolution. Leaders with intercultural responsiveness can navigate the diverse backgrounds of students and staff by fostering a sense of belonging and respect for all members of the college community. Overall, emotional intelligence also allows leaders and IR to communicate empathetically, to be active listeners in diverse perspectives, and address conflicts with sensitivity. Here are my references. Thank you for your time.